I worked for my local McDonald's for about 4 months or so. Yeah, it didn't last for too long. I like to believe that there's something better for me out there than fast food. Plus, this particular experience didn't exactly make me want to stay much longer. It's definitely the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. Trying to kiss ass and move up quickly. I let the managers know I would cover any shift they needed me to, and I could fill in for anybody that needed it. I needed the money. The more hours, the better. One night at around 8 p.m., just before I was about to head to bed, I got a call from work. Someone on the night shift had called in. Very irritated and tired, I hesitantly agreed to cover the shift and got up to get ready. I had never worked overnight before, especially not at McDonald's. Definitely not at any of my previous jobs either. Because of this, I was actually a little bit excited. I mean, it was 9 o'clock. There would be half as many customers coming through, and the manager on duty that night was John, the most laid-back guy that worked there. Pretty easy money in my opinion. When I arrived at around 8:30, they were slammed. I clocked in and chiseled away at the mountain of customers in the lobby. By 10:30 though, the sudden wave had died down, and the building was now mostly empty. It seemed the previous shift leader had left me with nothing but good luck. Even though this was my first night shift, it was just me and John. He was busy checking the drawers, and there didn't seem to be anyone else around. I was working the drive-thru, front counter, and the grill. Needless to say, I was a bit nervous if too many people were going to pull in that I was completely fucked. My drive-thru time would also be horrid at that point. Instead of remaining relaxed like I thought I would, I ended up so focused my heart was pounding the whole night. Fortunately, not many people actually came through. Anyway, at our restaurant, I'm not completely sure if it's the same for every Mickey D's, but our headsets will chime whenever someone pulls into the drive-thru. It's kind of a pixelated bell sound that gets very annoying very fast. This is exactly what I heard, so naturally I went to greet the customer. "Hello, welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you today?" I said with so much fake enthusiasm it even made me sick. I never quite understood what it was that told us a car was driving through, but the microphone was on, ready to pick up the customer's voice as they ordered. Yet all I could hear was white noise. Nobody picked up, nobody spoke. I didn't even hear the rumble of an engine idling. It was as if no one was there. Now, this wasn't too weird. We'd had this happen a few times. The thing can be triggered just by someone driving around the building or a person walking by the thing. I thought that needed to be fixed, that's for sure. I didn't want to know every time someone took out the trash in back or whatever as they rolled the bins through the drive-thru. After about 3 minutes of static though, the mic clicked off, meaning whatever was on the wait was gone finally. No more annoying noise in my ear. Less than a minute later though, it clicked on again, that bell chiming ever so loudly. I rolled my eyes and repeated my greeting. "Hi, welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you?" Again, there was no reply. The mic stayed on longer this time though. I swear at one point, I could hear heavy breathing and started to get freaked out. I was pretty sure someone was outside trying to mess with me. It turned off after about 10 minutes of me listening to this breathing. I was tempted to take off the headset and make John wear it instead. My be-all-I-can-be attitude got the better of me though. I tried to distract myself. I started scrubbing the counters which had already been wiped down and checking to see if anything in the empty lobby needed to be restocked. Everything was fine though. I needed to find something to keep myself busy. It was almost like there was something sinister about the darkness of the night just beyond the large lobby windows. When the bell chimed once again, I nearly fainted in surprise. I probably should have turned the volume down on the headset. Before I could say my shallow, meaningless greeting though, I heard the loudest, most blood-curdling scream. The moment I heard this screech, I threw off my headset and backed away from it. What the fuck was that? I shakily put it back on. I was pissed off and terrified at the same time. Without another thought, I ran angrily out of the store and headed through the drive-thru. I stood right next to the menu, but there was no one there. Still, somehow, the static from my headset never disappeared. The mic was still going. Whatever made the drive-thru go off must have still been around somewhere. Then I heard it. Someone whispering in a slow voice, "I see you." I ran back inside as fast as I possibly could. I had been standing right next to the mic, and I hadn't seen anyone there. Whoever was there must have been hiding or something. There was no one I could see that could have spoken those words to me. I ran back into the building and into the safety of behind the counter. I found John. He was at the manager's desk, head in his hand while typing in dates on the upcoming schedule. "What the hell was that?" I said louder than I meant to. He jumped up in his chair and turned around. "God, man, you scared the hell out of me." "What are you trying to pull?" I asked. "What are you talking about? I haven't done anything." He turned to continue typing on his computer. I felt kinda bad. I just interrogated my superior, the only fun one that worked there. I walked up front and stood behind the counter, just waiting for things to end. It was about 1:30 when I looked at the clock again. We were halfway through the graveyard shift. The night was going by so slow I ended up standing in the drive-thru nook. That way I could just play on my phone away from the view of the nearest camera. We had only 2 customers in the last hour, so it was even more slow than I thought it would be. I just stood there leaning against the counter by the piece of shit computer, playing Clash of Clans and checking Facebook every so often. Suddenly I felt cold air on my forearm. There was a feeling of chills. I looked over toward the drive-thru window, and it was ever so slightly open. I didn't pay it much attention though. I continued to invade random online folks. Suddenly there was a loud slam. I dropped my phone, cracking the screen when it hit the ground. I nearly had a heart attack. My eyes darted all over, searching for the origin of that noise. The drive-thru window had been thrown wide open. I had been standing right next to it, and I hadn't noticed anybody running off or walking up to it. I definitely hadn't seen anybody either. Who the fuck was doing this shit? I was done. I took my headset off and stood in the kitchen pretending to work, waiting for this terrible shift to end. Whether or not someone drove through the drive-thru, I didn't care anymore. I was not coming back after that night. The rest of the night, or morning I guess, passed by without any further incidents. Never in my life have I encountered anything so strange and terrifying. Standing out there right next to the microphone that cold night and hearing those words whispered to me, I will never forget that. And I will do anything in my power to avoid having to work in fast food ever again. Maybe I'm in denial, but I think every night that what I heard that night was nothing more than a prankster, hopefully not a ghost or demon that felt like it was taunting me. Remember when McDonald's had those jungle gyms with the ball pits and all that? Yeah, for the longest time, those were the hot spot for children to jump around and just have a fuck ton of fun. Hell, I even remember as a child playing with my temporary friends in those balls. We'd jump right in every time we'd go to McDonald's. I'd gleefully find other kids I'd never met before and jump into that rainbow-colored ball pit. Though, with a child of my own now, I've heard plenty of horror stories that make me keep my kids away from those areas altogether. Maybe it's not so much the actual horror stories I've heard that scare me though, as much as it's an experience that happened to me not too long ago. I try not to let my kids eat fast food. It's unhealthy and it's addictive. Eating fast food in and of itself is a terrible habit. But there's one thing that tempted me to treat my daughter and son to a couple of Happy Meals one day: convenience. Around noon, I was enjoying my day off with the kids. My wife was at work, and I hadn't bought groceries yet like I was supposed to. Not to mention, I was exhausted from work myself. This was my first day off in a very long while, so when my son Chris started begging me for McNuggets, I thought, what the hell? I stopped by our local artery clogging experts at McDonald's. It was extremely packed. There had to be 4 dozen people in there at least, either lined up waiting to order or sitting down awkwardly, staring down one another. As expected, the moment the kids saw the play area through the windows in the back, they took off running. They hadn't even told me what they wanted to eat yet. I figured maybe they'd only wanted to stop by McDonald's to play on the habit trail in the first place. After several minutes, I was finally up to order. I got them both a couple of nugget Happy Meals and headed to the play area. I sat down at the bench while the kids frolicked and played all over the damn thing. There were 10 other children playing with them, most of which looked like they hadn't bathed in a week. As you can probably tell, I'm not very fond of the McDonald's play scene, but again, I was desperate that day. This big hunk of plastic tubes and ladders could babysit my kids for an hour or so. That was fine. The kids played for about 10 minutes before they came down to eat their food. We were enjoying our meal when I noticed something rather strange. There was a chubbier child in the ball pit. He was red-headed with curly hair. What was strange was the expression on his face, though. He looked like he was about to start sobbing at any moment. He was frowning, and tears were forming up in his eyes. They were locked on one point in the room. I looked to see what he was staring at. It was a glass window with lightly busy midday traffic just beyond it. I kept eating my food, trying not to pay any mind to this crying kid, but for every bite I took, I was more and more worried. I mean, my kids were here too, and I didn't like seeing this kid crying anyway. I'd like to know what was wrong with him. He pulled himself up out of the ball pit and began to walk back over to a woman that must have been his mother. On the walk over, I noticed the kid's pants were down. He started pulling them back up. My first thought was, Jesus Christ, was this kid just ashking off in the ball pit? At that point, I was ready to leave. My appetite was gone, the appetite I'd barely had in the first place. I let my kids finish eating, though not saying a word about what I'd saw. Once they were done, I told them we had to go, and despite their whining efforts to make me stay, I made them get back in the car. Well, later that week, I was reading the newspaper. I'd made the mistake of drinking hot coffee when I read a certain article. I literally spat it out on myself when I read it. At that very same McDonald's that we had gone to that day, a man had been arrested for, get this, illegally assaulting children by hiding in the ball pit. Luckily, my kids had never gone in there themselves. That day, they had been so close to it though. In the headline photo, there was a woman being interviewed, and she was crying. It was that chubby boy's mother. I remembered her face and that red hair. That moment terrified and shocked me more than I had ever felt before. I feared for my children and for society as a whole. We let our kids run around and play and trust that the world around us is safe and protected. But that day, right under my nose, there was someone within inches that could ruin my children's life in an instant and force a lifetime of therapy on them. I'm grateful my kids were spared, but I feel sorry that poor little boy had to grow up with all that. Luckily, that perverted fuck got what he deserved. Also, if you're wondering about the case itself, it happened around '89. I've tried a few times these days to find it online, but it gets drowned out by all the other cases of pedophilia on the web. Doubt the story if you want, but as a father, I'm not spreading this to tell some disgusting lie. I'm telling you this as a warning and a cautionary tale that no matter how you've raised your kids, you gotta keep your eyes open, 'cause you never know who might be around. Public bathrooms have always scared me in school. No matter how bad I have to go, I would not use those bathrooms. I just couldn't even force myself to use them. I mean, I've seen kids make fun of other kids just for going to public bathrooms. Kids are horrible, and I wanted to avoid that at all costs. People scared me as well. They would embarrass you, humiliate you, hurt your feelings all over something so natural and so stupid. so for most of my life I avoided public restrooms. One day though, in 2002, we were driving through Dallas at the very end of a road trip. It was on our way home, and it was me and two other friends, Jessica and Ruby. It was around 11 at night, and we were on the highway. They were starving, and I was tired and had to pee real bad. We were still an hour away from home. I was already holding it in for about 2 hours beforehand. I'm surprised I even made it that far. Anyway, we were passing one of the many dozens of random McDonalds in Dallas when Jessica suggested we pull over and take a quick break. Of course, I was extremely hesitant about using the bathrooms there. Honestly, I would rather pee in a bottle in the car than go to a public restroom. For the first time in my life though, my body won out on this one. I got out of the car and ran in before I peed all over myself. It only took a second to locate the bathrooms, and to my dismay, there were no family restrooms. I was already there though, and seconds away from bursting. I threw myself with wild abandon through the swinging door. The very first thing that hit me was the smell. Now, let me tell you, just because it's a woman's restroom doesn't mean it's not disgusting, but this thing smelled rancid, like some sort of spilled milk or rotten diaper went bad in there. There were 3 stalls. I quickly checked for feet below the doors and saw they were each empty. The coast was clear. I opened the first one and nearly threw up. There was piss all over the toilet seat, used toilet paper scattered on top, and next to the toilet. It looked as if the thing had been used daily, but hadn't been flushed for weeks on end. I shut that one and very reluctantly checked the second stall. That one was clear and clean, but for some reason smelled 3 times as bad as the other one. Just in case, I checked the third stall. Disgusting as well. I stepped back into the second one and locked it. Well, it didn't really lock. The little bolt caught in the hole, but anyone who wanted to get inside that stall could easily push it open. That kinda creeped me out a bit, but I figured I'd be in and out in just a few seconds. I covered the seat with toilet paper and sat down. It was a relief to finally get everything out of my system. 15 seconds of relief later, I was about to stand up when I heard the swinging door open. I froze. Someone had entered the room with me. Immediately, I stayed quiet as possible, trying to pretend I wasn't there. Yes, I know that's weird freak behavior. I just really hated being in a vulnerable spot like that though. I waited for the person to do their own business, but I never heard the faucet come on. In fact, I never heard anyone open a stall either. Well, that was quite odd. I thought I heard the footsteps after the door opened, but now there was no sound at all. If anyone was there, I'd definitely be able to hear them breathing at least. I waited a few more minutes, but still no sound came. I assumed I was safe. Maybe somebody'd walked in and walked right back out. Maybe somebody had changed their minds about coming in. I didn't know. Just to be sure, I lowered my head and ever so slowly checked for the feet of anyone else in the room with me. As I looked down, though, I noticed a man's face staring up at me. He smiled a toothless grin. He was laying down on the bathroom floor, looking up at me from the other side. He was dirty, with messy gray hair and a darker gray beard. I jumped up off the seat and pulled my pants up, trying to cover all my exposed skin with my arms. I screamed. I knew everyone in that building would have heard me. Seconds later, I heard laughing and the sound of footsteps running out of the bathroom. 10 seconds after that, I could hear Jessica and Ruby. "Are you okay? Sherry, what happened?" Jessica called and knocked on my stall door. I could barely even talk. I didn't know I was crying, but there were definitely tears running down my face. I remembered I still needed to fasten my pants up, so I did. I stepped out to see their surprised and worried faces. "Oh my God, you don't look good. Did something happen? Are you hurt?" Jessica wanted answers. I shook my head. Some fucked up pervert was staring up at me from under the stall. "Jesus, are you okay? Where'd he go?" Ruby sounded angry. "I don't know, he just ran out." I started to calm down. We all walked back to the car, eyes peeled for that creepy man. The girls begged me to make a police report, but I couldn't help but feel, weird, I guess. I just wanted to get home, take a shower, and get into my own bed. Besides, I'd only seen the man for maybe 5 seconds before he was up and gone. I climbed in the back seat of the car and sat back before we stopped. I was tired and ready to go to sleep, but now I felt wide awake and homesick. I was a bit shaky as we took off. I ended up glancing back at the place, the big neon arch hurting my eyes. I swear to God, though, I saw that same man standing exactly where we had been parked before, smiling and waving goodbye at me. I got chills. Travel impacts girls a lot, so keep each other safe. I can only be thankful that creepy man wasn't more desperate. This is one of those things that I and probably everyone else easily assumed would never happen to me. Needless to say, I didn't expect it at all, and it's left me very twitchy and nervous. This happened in 2007 when I lived in Kansas. There was a local McDonald's in my town that I stopped by at every morning, or at least I tried to. It was one of those half gas station, half fast food joints. This one just happened to be at a very convenient corner on my way to work, so I'd often go in and grab a McMuffin in the morning and a cup of Starbucks espresso to get my day going. This was a Tuesday. I remember it all plain as day. Unfortunately, for some reason or another, the McDonald's side of the store was very crowded that morning. There were at least 30 elderly folks there, chatting up the place like a bunch of teenagers. I almost walked out. The line was a bit long, and I only had 20 minutes to get to work. The drive itself was 10 minutes long, so I didn't have long to be waiting. I had never been late though, and I was starved that morning, so I figured, what the hell? I stepped in line and waited, eyeballing the menu to see if there was anything new, or if there was something else I wanted, even though there was no way in hell I'd be changing up my routine. As I stood there waiting, I felt something poke against my lower back. Before I could turn around, I heard someone whisper a bit too close in my ear, "Don't do anything." My heart froze. I felt paralyzed. The voice continued while I tried not to panic. "I'm going to grab your wallet. Everything will be fine if you don't move and don't say a word." I was silent, but honestly, I had never been more terrified. Maybe it was a kid with a butter knife trying to take advantage of me, or it could be an escaped convict desperate for money with a gun in his hand. I had no way to be sure, and I wasn't about to die on a Tuesday morning on the way for work. I heard him nearly shout behind me. He just barely managed to whisper. The man sounded extremely pissed. That's when I realized I must have left my wallet in the car. Often, I would put my wallet in the passenger seat or in the cup holder, as it would make my back hurt or my bottom uncomfortable. "So where the fuck is it?" he said, asking very hurriedly. "It's in my car," I said nervously. "Well, looks like you're going for a little ride then." He seemed relieved. I thought he was happy we'd be going to my car, away from people, away from prying eyes. He could make me go anywhere he wanted me to. God, I was so scared. My heart was racing, and I wanted to take off running and scream that someone was mugging me. I was surrounded by so many people, but I felt more afraid than I'd ever been in my life. For the first time in my life, I was actually afraid I was going to die. I started thinking quickly. I had to figure something out. I had to get myself out of this fucking mess. If I turned around or made any sudden movements, surely he'd use the weapon he had shoved into my spine. If I spoke too loud, I'd be dead before anyone could do anything. So I was, stuck with my life endangered in the breakfast line at McDonald's. How the hell had my life turned out this way? There was one thing I could do though, that didn't require me risking the existence of an actual weapon behind me. The guy didn't sound old, but he didn't sound young either. I thought maybe I could talk my way out of this. I swallowed hard and gathered up my courage. "I don't think you want my wallet," I whispered back to him. My head turned to my side as far as I could get away with. "Shut up. Start walking." He seemed to be ignoring me. "I don't think $10 is worth 15 years in prison, buddy. A maximum security prison." He must have heard me this time because he seemed to stand still and didn't urge me to keep walking again. I tried to look even further behind me to see his face, but I couldn't manage. I did manage to see a woman with 3 unwieldy teen boys come in though. I continued, "Robbery with a firearm is a first-degree felony, and I don't think you'd be fast enough to shoot me or stab me before I ran through those doors." What the fuck was I thinking? My heart felt like it was going to explode. Every word I whispered nearly came out stuttered, but somehow I found the power to make them sound confident. Now, I was no lawyer, but I remembered a bit of the basic stuff from a legal studies course in high school. The kind of shit they nail into your head and you can't forget no matter what. Thank God for that this time. "Shut the fuck up. I'm sure you've got more money than that. I see that coat you're wearing. I saw that car you got out of too." "Well, if there's not more than 10, I guess I can take something else," he sort of snickered. "But let's just hope there's more in there for you." It hadn't worked, and now I was sure he was threatening to kill me if I didn't have the money. The fucked up part is, I really only had $10 in my wallet. I had recently paid a few bills and was ready to glide through the rest of the week with food from home. I'd done it a few times before. "Come on, keep moving!" He shoved the weapon in my back hard. It was cold and painful. I didn't want to move, but I had no choice. "Jimmy?" I heard a female voice behind us shout. Then there was a hard smack as if something fell to the floor behind me. There was a lot of movement. It made me turn around. The man was no longer looking at me. I turned around and saw one of the boys that had come with the woman earlier was wrestling around with the man. He shoved my mugger, who was far more thin and frail than he had sounded. He was wearing a thick black hoodie, and he was on his ass on the floor, staring at something that was laying on the ground. I looked toward it, a jet black pistol. It wouldn't have been noticeable blending in with that damn hoodie he wore. In an instant, I made a break for it, and so did he. Sadly, he was closer and grabbed the gun. I expected the worst to happen, but it didn't. He grabbed the gun and shoved it back in his pocket, then ran full speed out of the place. When I was sure he was out of the building, I looked around and saw everyone else had seen it too. They had seen the man drop the gun. Immediately, I got out my phone and called the police. I made a statement and told them everything. They talked to several other folks as well. Unfortunately, nobody got a good look at his face. Last I heard, he was never caught. I like to hope he ended up trying and failing again and was arrested for a different crime, because honestly, it's a bit hard to sleep at night knowing there are terrible people like that out there, and that there are likely even worse people out there too. This short but terrifying experience took place around late September of 2014. Me and some friends were making a night of it at my place, and at around 1 in the morning, we all got the munchies. We decided to hop in my van and drive over to the McDonald's that was about 2 miles down the road. It had been raining that night just before we left, so the empty streets had that creepy wet glimmer from the street lamps bouncing off them. It was already an eerie scene. The van's air conditioner hadn't worked for months either, so I usually drove with the windows down. We pulled up to the drive-thru, and I noticed there was no one in the parking lot, not a single car. There wasn't any in the drive-thru either. That was fine by me. It just meant we'd get our food more quickly. It's important to note that at this McDonald's, there were numerous trees on the right side. The restaurant itself was to the left. As you pulled through, it was almost like being in a small forest. It was too thin to really be that, though. Just on the other side of this island of trees led to a pharmacy. We pulled up in front of the menu and waited to be greeted. We waited, and eventually I said hello, trying to get someone's attention. No one answered. The guys were telling me to pull forward and see if they'd meet me at the window. One of them said that despite the 24-hour sign, they might be closed for repairs or something. I doubted that. If anything, the whole situation was kind of suspicious. Just when I decided to go ahead and pull forward to the window, one of my friends said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, stop!" I put my foot back on the brake and turned around towards him. "Did you hear that? There's something growling over there." I thought he was joking until I turned where he was looking and saw yellow eyes next to a tree about 5 yards away from the van. I could barely make out a low and steady growling. I assumed maybe it was a dog or something, so I rolled up the windows on that side. I didn't want it to try and climb in or jump at us. I continued to pull forward when suddenly whatever was behind that tree ran out of the darkness and beside the van. I only got a brief look, but I was entirely sure this was no dog. It looked like a grown man with a thin body and bony skin. Their skin was all leathery, with random hair all over it. I kept my foot on the brake and rolled up the rest of the windows right away. I didn't want to keep moving, just in case my mind was playing tricks on me, or this was some kid playing a joke. We all waited, spooked out of our minds. I kept looking out the windows to try and find that guy. Must have been somewhere we weren't able to see them. Someone in the back screamed. I looked toward them and saw at the back window just above the edge of the metal were the guy's eyes and his hands. He was just staring in at us. At that moment, we all screamed and jumped away from this guy. With a loud screeching noise, the guy took off back into the small patch of trees. I didn't hesitate. I drove back home. It wasn't worth a Big Mac staying next to these damn woods with this creepy weird guy out there. I have no idea what we all saw that night. We haven't seen anything like it since. I hope I never have to experience anything like that again. Next time you're out on the town and just can't wait to get home to have your next meal, think twice about stopping anywhere, even McDonald's. You're never as safe as you want to be. All it takes is one crazy person to decide you'll be their next victim, and you'll never see it coming.